Good morning, everyone. Please give us a few more minutes. We're having a few technical issues with our streaming, so just give us a few more minutes and we'll be starting shortly. Good morning, everyone. We are now ready to start. Good morning and welcome to our annual Trauma-Informed Symposium, where this year we will be discussing addressing misconceptions. We're ready, Vanessa? Thank you.
Okay. I think my other favorite one. I can't hear. Yeah, my other favorite one was.
Good morning. My name is Tiara Owens, and I'm the program manager of the South Chicago Neighborhood Network. And before we get started, we would like to have a thank you to our sponsors who have helped us plan this event. We thank you so much for all that you continue to do so that we continue the work in our South Chicago community. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to get started. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Abari Cartman. Dr. Abari is a father, son, brother, uncle, thinker, writer, therapist, photographer, drummer, and grassroots mental health advocate. He is a Chicago native where his culture and educational foundations were captivated by several African-centered institutions. He received his undergrad degree in psychology from Hampton University and a PhD in clinical and community psychology from Georgia State University. His recent work includes being a trauma-focused clinician, restorative justice coach, and program evaluator with HELP, LLC. HELP stands for Healing, Empowering, and Learning Professionals. Dr. Cartman has served as a professor of psychology at Georgia State University in the Cartwright Center of Inner City Studies at Northeastern University. Dr. Cartman recently created a male rite of passage curriculum called Manifest that is being implemented in juvenile detention centers, schools, and other community settings across the country. Dr. Cartman is Dr. Cartman is the former program director for Real Men Charities Incorporated, where for 3 years he facilitated weekly men's wellness and African drumming circles and was the associate editor of the South Side Drive magazine. Dr. Cartman is the immediate past president of the Chicago Association of Black Psychologists and curator of the Director of Black Mental Health Providers. As a consultant, Dr. Corwright facilitates trainings for adults and workshops for youth about maintaining mental wellness, critical analysis of hip hop and media, racial and cultural identity, developing authentic manhood, and healthy relationships. Dr. Cartman is currently completing his second book about Black spirituality. Please help me welcome Dr. Abari Cartman.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Tiara, and thank you for organizing this and you and your team for bringing us all together this morning. Um, I understand when technical difficulties happen and people feel rushed and the stuff gets behind and we feel like we got to make up time, but we ain't got nothing but time. We just here trying to experience as much as we can. So I wanted to make sure that we are pacing ourselves and make sure we have this conversation grounded and begin with just a couple of deep breaths. Um, I feel compelled to hurry up and get through the content and share all the information, but we're here and everything's going to be okay. And so I just want to make sure we started all together, taking a couple of deep breaths and having a moment of silence to welcome in our best selves, our ancestors, those spirit guides that help create the platform for these conversations to be rich and meaningful. We are in a moment where there's lots of loss and grief and struggle around the world. And we have all had personal loss that we want to remember those people who are not here on the call with us or on this planet physically with us. We want to welcome their spirits into this space. So I want us to start in proper order. The sponsors are important, but also our spiritual guides are also a part of this conversation. So I want to take a couple deep breaths together collectively so everyone can make sure we're prepared for this conversation. Lots of information will be shared, but we are the vessels to receive it. And we have to make sure that we are well and cared for and centered first. So let's take a couple quick seconds for some deep breaths. If you can, if you're seated somewhere, if you're comfortable somewhere, you can feel free to close your eyes if you like and take some deep breath in through your nose. Keep your mouth closed if you can, and send the air all the way down to the bottom of your belly. Expand your stomach like a balloon. Open up your diaphragm and get as much of that sweet oxygen into your body as you can. Some of the things that we need for healing are very simple. Just oxygen, rest, and water get us further than we are right now. So let's take a moment just to breathe and have a moment of silence in honor of those who cannot be here physically. All right. Okay, so now let's talk. Um, this topic is near and dear to my heart. As a father of two Black boys myself, I know the daunting and also the rewarding task of keeping our minds right, our spirits and our souls right, so that we could make sure that our children are healthy, but we healthy, and that our parents are healthy. I'm a caretaker for my mother, so there's the generations of health that are very much a part of my personal life, much more than the professional life. This is not just a mission for me, but this is my life. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share. Again, thank you all for hosting this and for centering Black men in the conversation. I think there's very particular things that Black men deal with and think about and struggle with, and oftentimes happens very silently. The theme for the conference, and particularly for today, is the hidden crisis. um, and so we want to spend some time bringing some light to those shadows, to expose those secrets, if you will, that often men carry alone, to make sure that the brothers on the call feel like what you came here for um, helps you relieve some of the burdens that are on you in this moment right now. One of the things that I appreciate most about creating space for Black men to talk and to having sort of therapy and group circles is that I get over and over again to hear those secrets that men carry. And so because of that, I just walk around assuming that I have no idea what my brothers are holding. Like I just have no idea what, no matter how good they look and how much money they got and how car they drive and how clean they are, because we're tough people. Like we strong and we resilient and we brilliant and we beautiful. And we also carry so much. And so I just want to make sure that for the brothers on the call that are taking a moment off of work, that might be in transit, that we want to make sure that you are seen and heard and felt, and that we can share something that can be a resource for you just to make this season a little bit lighter for you. So that's my intention for the day. I think that part of the medicine is connection, whether it's virtual or not. We are all vibing on the same wavelength, that we see each other. We have similar experiences and sometimes different experiences, but we all care deeply and have a compassion and grace for each other that I think can be a part of the strength that helps us get through some of these tough times. And there's no doubt that we are in tough times. That is not a secret. I think the secret is that how we carry it, how we hold it, how we cope with it is sometimes not good for us. And so the stories that I hear are, Doc, like, on the outside, I seem to be well put together, but on the inside, I'm crumbling, right? I hear that over and over again every day. And so for those brothers that might be in that moment, in this time, grieving losses that you haven't shared out loud, or carrying stress that no one knows about, or harboring secrets, or not having a hard time to forgive yourself. I just want y'all to know that that is the most common thing that I hear from men in my life, is that everyone is going through stuff that nobody knows about, and that part of what we want to do today is to bring light to that, but also find ways to heal from that, transform that pain, turn it into something
Mm.
purposeful, meaningful, and use community and create bonds and connections between each other where we can help lift each other up a little bit better. Because some of the stuff we ain't got to go through alone. It's part of the man box tells us we got to toughen up, we got to hold it, we got to just posture, and just like make sure everybody's okay. And I'm a father. Like I know my kids don't care if I'm having a bad day. They hungry anyway. I know that the pressures of having to stay alive in a capitalistic world that requires us to be productive and to keep the to-do list going and to be booked and busy. I know the pressures of that sometimes makes it seem like we don't have enough time to take care of ourselves. But this hopefully is a reminder that that is the most important thing to do in order to be able to be good fathers, to do meaningful work, and to make sure that we're here for the long run. So that is what we're here for today. And there's some stuff I wanted to share with that in mind. Um, Most of us are here in Chicago. There might be some folks from other places, but I'm going to censor my Chicago brothers in this conversation today because it is a South Chicago organization that has convened us. And we can start very quickly. I'm gonna go through this relatively quickly. It's recorded, so y'all might have some time to go back and take screenshots of slides if y'all need to. We're talking about trauma-informed care. We're talking about centering the understanding, the awareness that we are human beings going through experiences that, you know, sometimes are tough, that everyone has experienced the ups and downs of life. There's no way around it. There's no cure to it. The money or fame don't fix it. We see social media is exposing us to the lives of the celebrities, and in our imagination as kids, you think that one day I can get out the hood and maybe get rich and famous and now be free from the trauma, but it just kind of exacerbates the things. So there's something very basic about what does it mean to be human that includes experiencing pain, and sometimes that pain can be traumatic. A very basic definition of that is an emotional response to deeply distressing, disturbing events that overwhelms our nervous system's ability to cope. So there's certain things that we can experience that we can kind of deal with. The sadness is a part of it. Stress is a part of it. Like life just includes the dings and the bruises of life. But when it becomes traumatic, when it happens so consistently, when it's so complex that it's coming from different angles, sometimes that overwhelms your body in a way that makes you stuck, makes you freeze, it makes you disconnect, it makes you want to be outside of your body, it makes you not be aware of what's happening inside of your body. So these are the things that we today are going to try to find skills and resources to help get back into our breath, to be more aware of how the impact of trauma affects our day to day. And notice those signs, right? And I know a lot of us are busy, we moving, we got a lot of stuff to do, and sometimes there's subtle things that we just get used to, that we normalize around tension, around the feelings of exhaustion. Some of y'all might be getting 8 hours of sleep and still wake up tired. Some of it is just emotional because we have not found ways or had permission or safe spaces to process the ways that the trauma, the emotional difficulty, the pain, the grief rests in our bodies. It gets stored in your kidneys and your colon. It turns into high blood pressure. It turns into diabetes. It's connected to the physiological symptoms that we might can identify, but might not be able to put language to the emotional difficulties that are just as a part of the day to day as everything else. So these are some signs, some symptoms that if you're experiencing some of this stuff, if you're feeling withdrawn lately, when the fall comes, it can be easier to disconnect. If you find yourself having lots of headaches, if you get irritated often, if you're having a hard time eating, your appetite, or eating too much, eating too little, if you getting sick a lot this season because your immune system are weak, those forgetting things, um, feeling agitated, procrastinating. So things that we might just think are just common, things that are just happening all the time. Sometimes there might be something underneath that. So we want to expose that. We want this to not be a hidden crisis anymore. We want this to be a very open, out loud. The brothers are talking about it. We're honest about it. We keeping it a buck for real, through and through, holistically about what it means to be alive, to be Black, to be men. The days of just holding it and keeping it tight are over for us because those things have eroded our ability to be alive and full in ways that are not good for us. And so some of these things that we are trying to tap into, we're trying to encourage men to do more of, are relatively simple things to do. The hard part is the prioritizing. The hard part is getting out of that sort of man pressure where we feel like we always have to just keep moving, just keep moving. Whatever happens, just get up, shake it off, you know what I mean, walk it off. I tell my sons sometimes too when they fall, just walk it off, right? But these things, the writing in journals, the drinking more water, the resting, sharing pain with people, the healthy eating, exercising, laughter, gratefulness, prayer, service, being around nature, consensual touch, art, drawing, dancing. These are sort of simple ideas. We're in a moment now where we are encouraging people to get professional help if you can. But we also honest about the fact that there's a shortage of providers, that there's barriers to access to care, that even if you got health care, sometimes it's hard to get off the waiting list into someone's office to talk about the things that we're dealing with. So I like to start here with just everyday things that we can get into to be aware of the trauma and to get into the rituals, to have a lifestyle of care that gives us access to those things that bring us balance, that relieve the tension, that allow us to have a centering that is not productivity, to really resist the trauma in our bones that is connected to an ancestry that was forced to work from sun up to sundown and then created a system that did not give us access to being able to care for our families as protectors and providers. But we still have to posture that in ways that is very, very difficult sometimes. And so the idea is to shift our mindset. This is the conversation for today. How do we shift our mindset as men from being producers to being humans, to being fully aware of our potential and to activating our best selves, having peak performance disconnected from capital, right? Um, so that's a mindset shift. It goes from just I as a vessel am just the thing that they're doing the things to being the most important piece in the ecosystem of my life. And if you value something, if you see something as precious, then we as men will spend all of our time and money investing in things that to take care of those things that we think are valuable. I know men that take better care of their shoes than their bodies. I know men that take better care of their cars because they value that thing. If you got a premium body, you got to put premium fuel in that body and you got to rest that body, right? And so we just had to make sure that we are prioritizing ourselves and valuing ourselves. But all of that is, just the individual level of the traumatic experience that we've all experienced, some more than others. Some have found coping mechanisms that help them. A lot of the therapies that I was trained to do are giving us tools to cope and manage within systems that are inherently designed to maintain a particular trauma that Black men are experiencing and profit sometimes from the pain that in sessions like this, we're talking about healing. And so it's important to me that we don't spend all of our time at the individual level of this traumatic experience. We exist within these circles of context, organizations, communities, governments, micro, macro systems are at play in relationship, and there's trauma at different levels that if we just tell you to deep breathe, then there would be systems around you that are still operating at their fullest capacity to maintain that trauma, that breathing can only help you manage through just a little bit, just to be maybe a more efficient cog in that system. But we want bigger, we want better, we want to transform systems. We want you to be fully operating at your fullest capacity. And that means being aware that trauma is more than just what happened to you in your house, in your community. It means more than just the impact of your nervous system in your body. That means that we have to look at what is it, the economic systems at play? What are the government systems at play? What are the structural inequities, the disparities? What are the things embedded in the American system that has perfected itself for centuries to maintain a certain level of power that is in by design sick and traumatic in and of itself? So beyond the diagnosing individuals as having anxiety disorders or thinking about your own individual addiction or your own individual depression, it's important for me to also, in this conversation about trauma, contextualize the traumatic systems historically for us as Black men, um, which is why it's really important, I think, to have this specific conversation about Black male trauma. There's a lot of pressure these days to talk about people of color and sort of combine the BIPOC, the Alana. So we're talking about different sort of so-called minority groups. And I think those moments are important for solidarity. I think that we need to have more Black, brown solidarity moments. And I think that this moment is important also to distinguish the unique traumatic paths that Black people in this country have experienced because of the histories and the lasting legacies of enslavement that we uniquely experience. That means that part of the trauma that we are expressing in this moment isn't just addiction and depression, rising suicide rates. Part of the trauma is the fact that we're having this conversation in English. Part of the trauma is that I'm introduced as Dr. Cartman. My last name, Cartman, still a scar of a wound of a generations of trauma that imposed someone else's will upon my ancestry. So there was a report that came out from the National Coalition for Blacks for Reparations a couple of years ago that talked about this field of epigenetics that's looking at the ways that trauma is passed down in our genes, is stored in our blood. And so we are born at disadvantages in part because of the systematic structure of traumatic transmission over centuries. Um, we also got brilliance locked in our blood, right? We also come from the first people on the planet. And so there's something about us that gives us a certain power and resilience and brilliance and genius. So those things are in competition in our bodies, right? So we're not talking just, what happened to you in your house. We're talking about what has happened to us as a people. And to understand how to transform and heal that trauma requires a larger lens than I think the mental health system is often designed to be able to do. So we got to really look at this. I was taught psychology from a very narrow worldview, right? A lot of the stuff that I present today, I didn't get it from school. I went to a lot of school, read a lot of books, read a lot of papers, um, and that system did not help me think about how to heal, transform, free the generational trauma that Black people, that Black men in particular have experienced and continue to experience in this country. The reason this is a hidden crisis, the reason that the mental, emotional, spiritual struggles of Black men is not a overt, a common conversation is because a lot of the trauma is hidden in other places in other public conversations that we're having here in Chicago. So we might see more things on the news about wealth disparities. This is another report that came out from Chicago Trust that says that Black folk in Chicago have a median income of zero, right? We're talking wealth disparity. We're talking Chicago just got voted one of the top tourist cities in the world. Like there's a version of Chicago that people think of as Navy Piers and downtowns and the deep dish pizza that is not the reality for a lot of Black men that I know, a lot of Black men that I work with, and I spend time in schools and juvenile detention centers, and I go to places where the most vulnerable of us are, and they world is nothing but trauma, and they watching their back, and they're having to protect themselves, and they having to be involved in underground economies to feed their kids. Chicago is different than other people's Chicago, and there's a trauma embedded in that that is not hidden. That it is very easy to see. You can just drive from different area codes to see what the difference of how opportunities and how neighborhoods are designed and how schools have resources. Those very open, obvious disparities are the source of a lot of the individual trauma that we experience. And that's why it becomes hidden. because it's hard to see, particularly when you work in class and you just kind of trying to feed kids and make it through the day. It's hard to be able to do the analysis, to spend time studying. If the folks that get the opportunity to go to school and read all the books and get the public health degrees and to study sort of how neighborhoods are shaped and formed, they get to see very clearly what disparity and inequity look like. But when you in it, when you the fish in the water, you just breathing it. It's just what it is. We think that it's normal. We think that this is what life is supposed to be. We think that the communities are just violent without an explanation of what happened to the community. We think that Black people are deficient. We think that something wrong with us. We broken. We violent. We steal from each other. We can't trust each other. There's something inherent about who we are is the narrative that happens when we don't have a systemic explanation for the traumatic things that have happened and continue to happen in this city that result in an individual level of anxiety, depression, grief, addiction, suicidality. Um, so the public story, you turn the news on every night, and I watch the news sometimes. Sometimes I gotta turn it off because it's just too depressing. But the news is Chicago is violent, the homicides, Black Chicagoans 20 times more likely to become homicide victims. We're more likely to shoot and be shot as Black men. Um, over the past 12 months, the homicide victims compared to their peers within 10 to 9 to 10 homicides on the south and west side. The likelihood of catching the killers um, hits a new low. I'm again, I spent a lot of time in prisons. So when I think about the killers, even I think about children who didn't get what they needed, who had distorted views of community, who were neglected in ways that were extremely traumatic. And the first time they had conversations about that were when they were locked up, right? So we see the crisis, we see the mental health struggle. It just hides itself in violence numbers. It hides itself in poverty. It hides itself in opioid addictions. We got overdose rates that are not even counted in the suicide rates that are increasing in crisis levels of numbers. Underneath that, there's a sense of worthlessness, a sense of despair, a sense of disconnection that is hidden, but it shows itself in ways that are really troubling in the city right now. The life expectancy gap between Black and non-Black Chicagoans has widened over the last couple of years. So we're talking about like if you feel like you barely stand alive, if you have that sense in your body that you just barely making it, that you just day to day, like just trying to get through day by day the best that you can, and sometimes you don't know that you're gonna live much longer. That is not a delusion in your mind. The actual reality is that we are living less years in this city based on what zip code we're born in. That's an inequity. That's not our fault. That's not because of who we are. That's something that happened to us and that's continuing to happen by design through structures, through economic flow, through disinvestment in neighborhoods. We can unpack the mystique of it. We can investigate the mystery of it and find that the reason that we're not living as long are things that are preventable. The chronic disease is the most sort of the largest murderer of blackness in the city. And part of that has to do with just access to food, access to healthcare, access to opportunities to exercise. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes are the things that are most likely to explain the life gap between Black and white folk here in the city. Homicide is second. Um, we've been talking a lot about opioid overdoses. Um, they are disproportionately impacting Black males aged 45 through 64. This is data from 2 years ago. We are seeing that. So we're talking a lot about the young folk, and I spend a lot of time working with young folk doing mentoring. But the age range, I'm 44, right? So we talk about my peers and a little bit older than me. 45 to 64 are the most disproportionately impacted group. These Black men in this age are more likely to find themselves not being able to cope with the trauma and seek addiction as a way to release from the burdens of their life and die because of it. That's a Black male problem in a very particular way that requires unique interventions, unique analysis, unique resources, And part of the conversation today is to figure out what that can look like and what we need to do for each other and what the city has to do if it really cares about the people that it is it claims to steward. So this is a very specific thing, right? So again, it's important. If people are wondering why we're not talking about the women today, why we're not talking about other groups today, that there's a particular thing that's happening to Black men in a very unique way that has happened historically to us that we have to unpack, to unravel, to undo, to transform. And unless we do that, we will be missing the mark. We would try to punish away the violence problem. We might try to manage the overdose, but we're not really actually doing healing work until we get at the root of this. We got some young folks that did a report uh, maybe a year or so ago. This is through um, I forget the organization name. I put the link in of to the whole report. But we had they asked young folks. They created a youth organizing um, research collaborative, and they asked their peers what they think about mental health, what they think about mental health for men of color in particular. We found that what we know, what we just see every day, what we experience in our hearts and our bodies, what we see in our families, they found in the data, which was that we struggling, that men are having challenges with their mental health. They see the connection between systemic inequities and mental health. They don't feel like these systems are built to support them, to see them fully, to navigate their full experiences. They're finding ways to cope. This is through the pandemic and beyond, through their own sort of social network connections through video games. They're using music, particularly hip hop. They're finding their ways to heal because again, because we're brilliant, we will figure it out. But we're doing it up against the grain. We're doing it upstream. We're doing it without resources. And I think there's ways that we can collaborate and strategize and think about what can we really actually do to prevent some of these things from happening, the violence, the suicide, the addiction, and do it in ways that are genuinely transformative for us. So that's the call for today. We're going to have a wonderful workshop. Brother Jacob Dancer is going to help us really think through some of the specifics of navigating this and look at detailed resources. I kind of wanted to set the stage. Um, I actually made the suggestion for putting "You Good Bro" on the flyer. Um, and after I looked at it and thought about it, right, I thought about how like I love the engagement of "You Good Bro." Like I love the phrase of just like checking in with your brothers. I wanted to expand the phrase though in this conversation. I wanted to think more deeply about how I think it would make more meaningful connections for us if we challenge some of the language that we use because "You Good Bro" has a automatic response to it. And I do it. Like I'm saying, this is my personal experience. Somebody say "You good, bro," automatically, yeah, bro, I'm good, without even thinking about it. We walking by, dap up, yo, yeah, I'm good. Everything's cool. All good. I got a bunch of phrases that say, yeah, I'm good. I can, ain't no complaints. Another day, just making it, bro. Yeah, what I'm saying, I can respond to "You good, bro" over and over again in a way that never actually has a meaningful connection with the brothers that I'm passing. And the missed opportunity in that is that there might be somebody that really wants to know how I'm feeling on that day. They might have the time, and I might be carrying something that I need to release, that I need to vent. They might not have a solution for me, but just the opportunity to share what I'm going through gets it off of my chest in a way. They don't mean I got to dump it on my brother, but if we share it together, and he might have some insight that I might not have thought of because I'm in it, because I'm swimming in it, because I'm just inundated with it. I wanted to challenge us to think about how we speak to each other on a day to day that goes beyond the surface. This is the theme for today. There's a hidden crisis. There's secret burdens. We want to expose them. We want to make sure that our brothers are clear that we can be a resource to each other, that we don't have to wait for the waiting list for the professionals, but we can be a resource to each other just by having meaningful conversations in our day-to-day practices with your brothers, with your uncles, with your fathers. A lot of us grew up in houses where our fathers did not model that, but the young people are pushing us to go beyond the surface to really develop our emotional intelligence. And I think some of the language that we use in passing could facilitate opportunities for us to really develop the intimacy that's needed to create the support systems that would allow us to experience the healing despite the trauma, to create the networks of shared care for each other, that go beyond just the, like, you good, bro. I already gave him a response when I say you good, bro. It almost tells my bro I ain't got time to hear the truth. I just wanted to check in, like almost like as a routine. I want to suggest some other things that we say to our brothers. If you care about somebody for real, like if you got brothers in your life, like your little brothers, your blood brothers, your work brothers, your frat brothers, your community brothers, your neighbors, if you got brothers in your life, I want to encourage you to think about when you see them, whether they, again, don't assume that because they look like they doing well that they are. Maybe even assume that they're carrying something, they have perfected the presentation of well, right? That's my assumption. My assumption is that when I see somebody look like they're doing good, I assume that they're really good at putting that on. And so sometimes it might be a repetitive thing that needs to happen before. And I'll speak for myself. Sometimes you got to ask me 5 times how I'm doing. Like, no, for real, how you doing for real? Before I be like, okay, they really actually want to know. This is a safe space. Somebody really is cared and invested in listening to what I'm experiencing. Because you say, well, you good, bro? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm grateful. And those things are true. Like I am fine. Like I'm grateful. I know for sure that there are privileges that I experience, that sometimes I watch the news and I think about people in the world that have so much less than I have. I'm looking at the Sudan, I'm looking at Haiti, I'm looking at Gaza, I'm looking at children that are just hungry for real. And so it's hard to complain in a world when, I'm warm and I got food, my kids are good. The truth though, there are still things that I'm carrying. But my immediate response is to lean towards gratefulness, is to lean on the strength and power that I believe that I have. But the answer to the question of you good, bro, is often not really. It's often not really. There's always something in my life, in my world. There's always some anxiety that I'm carrying. Um, Always worried about my kids. Yeah, I feel like my kids got too much screen time. My sugar high, my cholesterol high. Like when I have rough days and I want to release and I'm gonna go eat a snack and have some comfort food, I'm always thinking about the thing I'm putting in my mouth is also slowly killing me. And then that becomes stressful, and I got to just exercise, but I don't feel like it, right? And then I got these anxieties about I got dirt on my name, like that carries I carry it with me. It's false allegations that have been happening that happened years ago. Every time I speak publicly, I worry about, right? So I'm good, but like, I mean, there's stuff that's on my mind. And I would not normally say that to a brother passing. But if they ask me what I need, if he asked me if I've rested well, if a brother asks me what brings you joy, bro, what you excited about, what you looking forward to, when do you feel most alive? Have you been feeling seen lately, bro? Is your work fulfilling to you? Are you not just doing it just to do it? You're not just got 9 to 5s, are you clocking in? Are there things that you can do to supplement your income, to be more creative about being alive fully? That's not just about checking in and working and following somebody else's, building somebody else's dreams. Are you carrying any hidden burdens that I can assist you with? Right, you good, bro, is good. You want to check in, but there's things that I think that we can do as brothers with each other to really actually meaningfully connect with each other in ways that could save somebody's life. They could really give somebody an opportunity. And you might not have the time in that moment. That's fine to say that. You might say, like, I ain't got time to really talk about it. We can't get into it right now, but I really do care for real. And so let's schedule a time to go get something to eat, bro. Right? Let's get on the Zoom and tell me more about that. Let's see if I can do something to help. I might can help you find some resources, right? That's something that we must do for each other. And the awareness of the bringing light to the trauma and the hidden suffering, we need to make assumptions that you have no idea what your brother's going through, but you actually might have some, right? You might could have some because what you've been through, you might could assume that he might be experiencing some of that too, and he might be just as good as hiding it as you are. And so if we challenge each other to speak more openly and then take our brothers to some of the events that are happening. Chicago is full of stuff. These are all events that are upcoming. This is November 16th. There's a Walk It Like You Talk It event put on by TMH Man Cave in Northwestern. There's gonna be a panel and there's gonna be food and discussions. Um, we do a free men's yoga, somatic yoga every Sunday on the South Side, 71st, a couple blocks over off of Jeffrey. We breathing, we connecting, we moving, releasing our stress and our anger. TMH Man Cave is an organization that if y'all not following, please look into them. They do monthly wellness groups, sometimes virtually. They do really creative stuff around boxing and mental health and um, fatherhood. So these are all just events that if you go to their website, you can find them. We also looking at stress. We also looking at diet and nutrition. This is an event coming up with Brother Sadiq. This is next Monday at Blue Door Neighborhood Center. So if you preparing for the holidays, you're dealing with the grief, and you know that this is one of those times when you eat more and you eat sort of more poison than you do medicine, that he has strategies that help us through this holiday season that can help us really think about how to be well holistically. We have a grieving session virtually coming up in November through Blue Door again from different cultural perspectives, talking about how to hold grief and how to process. If you are not familiar with Trisha Hershey, she will be in town with her new book, with her Nat Ministry. So if y'all can come here, so I just want to present this to the men, to the community, to the folks that love men, to the wives and to the mothers, to bring the men along, that there's lots of things happening. We need to find the resources, share the resources, prioritize that is something that really is what men do and not something that we put off to the side that we find time for when we figure it out. We make time later, we figure it out. We have to prioritize that now, first, soon, because our literal lives are dependent on it, and our young people are watching us. And we have opportunities to show them how to be full, whole human beings in ways that center our wellness, that center our livelihood, our joy, and our connection in ways that uh, can't nobody do for us. Ain't nobody gonna come save us. And no, whoever the next president gonna be, we have to vote for ourselves in the day-to-day interactions of how we eat, how we love each other, how we care for each other, how we build community around wellness in ways that needs to be at the top of our priorities. I'm probably twice as much time as I was given, so I'm gonna stop here. I'm so sorry for talking so much, but um, that's all I have to share for today. Thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for being here. For the men that showed up and for the people that love the men in y'all lives. We got work to do, but we got the resources to do it. And we're powerful and brilliant enough to figure it all out. So thank y'all for being here.
Dr. Abari, thank you so much for getting us off to such a great start. We appreciate all the resources that you had to give, to offer to everyone on the call. We look forward to collaborating again in the future to make sure that our men in the community are getting the help that they need. I would like to get ready to introduce you to our presenter, Jacob Dancer. Jacob Dancer joined Metropolitan Family Services in December 2022 as the Program Director of Behavioral Health at the Calumet site. As the Program Director, Jacob manages outpatient mental health, foster care stabilization, adoption preservation, behavior health, case management, and intake programs. Jacob has over 33 years of experience working in the clinical field servicing youth and families. Prior to coming to Metropolitan Family Services, Jacob serves as the resident director at UCAN, a social service agency that serves and impacts over 21,000 at-risk children, youth, and families across Illinois. For over 28 years, Jacob served as a frontline resident staff member and therapist before joining leadership, where he was able to be involved in the development and coordination of many ranges of clinical mentoring, youth leadership, mental health, and family-related services through management, collaboration, and engagement with community organizations across the Chicagoland area. Jacob actively worked to address levels of violence in North Lawndale, as well as supervise and administer clinicians, providing a wide range of therapeutic services to participants in community-based outpatient counseling settings. Because everything that everyone does is done with the focus of maintaining and sustaining safety, Jacob utilizes safety as the anchor to leading a behavior health team and providing supportive care, empathetic, and system clinical services to individuals and families to equip them to learn, to earn, to heal, and to thrive. So please help me in welcoming Jacob Dancer.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to rely on my tech person to advance the slides, and I'm actually going to monitor the chat a little bit because I'm an interactive presenter, and therefore I will pose questions to all of you, and we will get it going. So I was not aware there's going to be like almost 100 people here. So let's get started. So next slide. So there are many cultural factors that contribute to the stigma of mental health. When you see on this slide, man up, be a man, you're too emotional. What do you think of? So anybody want to just like chat, put in the chat, what do you think of when you see man up, you are too emotional, or be a man?
Don't be weak.
Don't be weak. Okay. Toxic masculinity, extreme trauma, your true self. See a couple more. Don't express your feelings. Learn to ignore your feelings and suppression, hiding your emotions. Okay, there's a lot of things. Father talking to his son. Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. So typically, boys and men are taught like, don't cry. You need to man up and don't show any emotion. Be strong when you're hurt. If you are hurt, don't show it. Next slide. Now, if you are a man and you do not demonstrate being strong, then you are a man who may be perceived as demonstrating weakness. Because mental health issues are signs of personal weakness, of being broken, many in boys keep their mental health issues a secret, as Abari was talking about. What messages have you heard that show Black men's mental health as a personal weakness? So I see some of these things that are in the chat already demonstrate that, but what do you hear that shows signs of personal weakness for Black men? Too soft. It's only okay to cry when you win a championship. Oh, wow. I like that. Crying. Openly crying. So being emotionally vulnerable is not okay. That's one of the messages that people, Black men, hear. Being sad, being weepy, or mopey is not okay. Never show any weakness. I like that one. The Black man may hear, how are you going to take care of the family if you are depressed? Get over it and go to work. Next slide. So again, I'm going to make reference to Obari and the indication of secrets. Keeping mental health issues as secrets reflect the consequences of Black men's mental health viewed as personal weakness. Black boys and men may experience shame about having mental illness and worry that they may be discriminated against due to their condition. They may be kept from getting a job because of their mental illness. They may be kept from making the team, the basketball team, the baseball team, the football team, because of their mental illness. And shame makes us feel small. Shame keeps us from taking risks, such as furthering our education. You may always want to go to college, but you're too afraid of the shame of what if you don't get in, so you don't apply. Getting a new job, same thing. You may be afraid that you might not get the job, and that rejection is too much, so you just don't apply. Moving to a new city, even moving neighborhoods. You may want to move out of Auburn Gresham and move to Pilsen, but you're too afraid of moving to a community that you don't know anyone, so you don't. And this is one of my favorites, ending an abusive relationship. Black men may stay in an abusive relationship because of the shame of admitting that they're too weak to do anything about the relationship, so stay in it. And what that says, shame and fear work hand in hand in paralyzing the Black men and exposing their emotional vulnerability. So what do men and boys do if they are too ashamed to admit their mental illness? their powerlessness, their sadness, and their anxiety, but they act out. See, when people feel powerless, they act out. And what does acting out look like with Black boys and men? Let's see what you guys say in the chat on that one. What's acting out look like with Black boys and men? Fighting, bullying, cheating, hypersexuality. Oh my goodness. Jail, abuse, withdrawal, moodiness. I'm gonna come back to that one. Dismissal. You can see one more. So those are things hollering violence. Those are things that most of those things are acting out outwardly. Next slide, please. Inward acting out may present as self-injurious behavior such as cutting or as well as suicide. Higher risk of suicide is in the Black males, where it's about 13 per 100,000 Black men compared to 7 for non-Hispanic white males, indicating there's a higher risk. Next slide. So what do you think contributes to making Black men's mental health problematic? Tiara and Vanessa can't respond to this because they know all the next slides. So what do you think contributes to making Black men's mental health more problematic? Dr. Cartman already talked about some of these things already. Stereotypes, culture, anti-Blackness, higher social expectations, social media. I want to come back to that later on too. Lack of awareness, money. I'm going to talk about that. Acceptance. Let's see, one more. Opportunity. All right, next slide. Thank you for all those responses. Underutilization of mental health services. See, Black men don't seek mental health care enough. Black boys and men may be afraid to demonstrate needing help, too afraid to show emotional vulnerability because no one that they know has ever asked for help with being sad or too nervous. A lot of the resources that Obari put out, those are very, very refreshing to see. They need to be all over the city, and I'm sure he's working hard to make that happen. But because only 26% of Black males seek mental health care, compared to 40% of white males, that suggests a significant gap in access and utilization. Next slide. Now, because of the stigma of mental health in the Black communities, Black men may turn to seeking other resources to manage their mental health. Can you name some resources that may be seen as resources for Black men who need help with their mental health? What other resources do Black men turn to? Drugs, sex, drugs again, church, alcohol, again, sports, yes, community centers. So I'm going to throw out family. Grandparents may be that intergenerational resource that the Black man is looking for. And grandparents may tell them, you don't need to talk to nobody. You just need to like figure it out, be a man. And as we saw in the chat, church is another example that Black men may turn to as a resource. And I'm fine with messaging of praying on it. I'm absolutely fine with that. Praying on it and doing more than just praying on it. You have to like do something active, seek some source of resource. In the movie Central Intelligence, Kevin Hart refers to Black men don't go to a therapist, they go to the barbershop. Talk through their issues. And I've been to my fair share of barbecue, a bit of conversation. I wouldn't really necessarily call it a therapist or social worker's perspective. And the gym. The gym is another place that Black men turn to as a resource for their mental health. And I have a specific story. I've been going to the gym for quite a while, and there's a guy who was at the gym, and we would just talk. He recognized me from years ago when I used to work out at 95th and Damon, the old Bally's, formerly known as Chicago Health Club. And we were talking about how he wanted to get some form of help for his, he had a health issue, a health condition. And all it took for me to say is get it done. And it must have been in my eyes or some sense of safe, or I was presenting, but get it done actually resulted in him going and getting his procedure done. And when he returned back from being out for a couple of weeks, he thanked me to the moon. Even brought his girlfriend with him to have her thank me as well. And you're not going to come across a Jacob Dance all the time to tell them to get it done. But sometimes you do come across somebody who can give you some source of resources at a place, even the gym. Next slide, please. So this slide is a little depressing for all of us because we all know that trauma and violence is very, very prevalent in the United States of America, LA, New York, you name it. The Black boys and men's exposure to violence and trauma impacts their mental health negatively, such as PTSD, complex trauma, and major depression. Further, their exposure to violence without any healthy interaction or intervention may use using violence to solve their own issues. They may use violence as a tool to resolve the conflict. And boys using verbal and physical violence resulting in suspensions and expulsions in schools decreases the opportunity for these boys to receive healthy intervention from school staff. So if they're suspended or expelled, they're not going to be able to meet with the school social worker. They're not going to be able to meet with the school counselor. So who are they meeting with instead? They're meeting with the people on the corner. They meet with people who are actually suggesting and endorsing negative coping strategies to resolve their conflicts. Next slide. Because of the stressors embedded in patriarchy, such as men needing to be the breadwinner, men will ignore any mental or physical illness to make money. Men will not go to the doctor because they will cost money. Men will not do whatever it takes because they feel the stress of the family to be the provider. All of this and more contribute to poor mental health outcomes for men. What are some of the things that you guys have heard who are here on the Zoom that show how men would choose working to address poverty and unemployment? So Kenji's asked me to rephrase. So Black men will choose to go to work is to make money instead of address their mental health or their physical illness. What has been your experience of that? Break family tradition of being poor, suffering. That's a good one. To obtain material items to impress people they don't know and don't care about them. Well, that goes back to what Abari talked about with the taking care of the car more than taking care of themselves. They become angry and agitated very easily. There's a lot of stress in making money and hiding pain. Yes. Next slide, please. So I'm going to make one more comment. Men's worth is determined by their work and their money. That is one of the major things that contribute to Black men ignoring their physical and mental health. It is more important for some Black men to look like they're making it than to address what it is about them that is not well. So, because of that, Black men may feel more comfortable receiving mental health interventions from Black men, but there aren't that many Black male therapists. We got Obari, we got myself. I can name like 5 others that I know, but I'm sure there's more than that. But for the most part, we are underrepresented in the Black community. Black boys and men are less likely to feel safe and trust their non-Black mental health professionals, and therefore they don't seek quality mental health care. And when Black men may feel that the field is culturally insensitive because they don't have a Black man as their mental health professional or counselor. And when they don't feel safe to be honest about their mental health, that actually influences the quality of the intervention. Lying about what's really going on with them, glossing over what the illness is, saying they're not diabetic when they see the doctor for the first time when they truly are. And when they do the blood sample, they find out they're type 1 diabetic. In what ways has cultural insensitivity been shown in the Black community? In what ways has cultural insensitivity been shown in the Black community? Labeled as aggressive, attaching label is not supported. Oh, that's a very good one. Enabling negative behavior. Next slide. So earlier in the chat, I saw drugs and alcohol being referenced to quite often. There are higher rates of substance abuse in Black males. And there is very little help for Black men to get both mental health support and substance abuse support for occurring condition. You can see here the percentages there with the 52% and 34%. It's just really, really bad. And when you think about it, when you have that strong of a disparity between 52% and 3.9%, what is that message to us? That message is that we're not prioritizing as a society taking care of mental health and substance abuse. 34% receive mental health care only. 52% don't receive mental health or substance abuse treatment. And only 3.9% receive substance abuse treatment overall. So next slide. So what can we do to address issues of Black men and mental health? Well, for one, we need to remove the shame tied to mental health. And that starts with all of us. That is, Black men need to focus on removing the shame. That's the family. That's the kids. I'm a father as well. So my son, if I have mental health, it will be to my advantage to have my kid acknowledge me having mental health and mental illness versus send a message to me that it's not okay for me to show myself as broken. It's important for women to be supportive of men when they show mental illness or physical illness instead of feeling like they have to be man and not show any weakness. And we have to create safety for emotional vulnerability. We have to really present to Black men that it's okay for them to be sad. It's okay for them to ask help from a therapist and not being seen as, oh, you just need to just get it over it and move forward. They need to have spaces where they can go and be emotionally vulnerable and feel invited to be emotionally vulnerable. And we need to, as much as I hate to say this, we need to have more Black men in the field. Um, I graduated from grad school. There were 15 other Black men with me. Only 3 of us ended up being clinicians. The rest of us ended up being in the field of administration or public policy. And that's great. We need to be in those spaces. But when I get an email from someone saying, do you know any Black men who can be a therapist for my kid? I mean, how many do I have to choose from? In Black families, communities must normalize and accept depression, anxiety, complex trauma, and other mental health. But how could that be done consistently? How can Black families, communities normalize and accept depression, anxiety, complex trauma, and other mental health disorders consistently? Reiterating that it's okay to fail on the journey to healing. Thank you, Blanca. Mental health therapy and counseling, going to rehab is based on slow and hesitant trust issues. That's true. Prioritize mental health in the workplace as we do annual physicals, mental health, dental, vision benefits. So I'm going to comment on that one that Melody just said. So these days, when you are 12 and up, say 12 to 18, the doctor will excuse the parent from the room and ask questions related to mental health while you're out. And some parents take offense to that, but the primary care physician is actually doing a brief mental health exam during the medical exam. But it still needs to prioritize, definitely. Next slide. So I kind of went a little fast because I recognized that I was started later, but are there any questions?
Jacob, we have one in the chat. Sharon wants to know, how do you get children at an early age in school settings that have mental health?
So it requires for the parent to recognize that their child is demonstrating some form of mental health issue. And it has to start with a primary care physician. And it has to be an honest conversation with a primary care physician that your kid is demonstrating some form of mental health for a referral to be made to organizations such as the one I work at or any other organization and or a private therapist.
Thank you. So James said, address the criminalization of Black mental illness and substance use. Is that a question, James?
No, that was just going along with the previous conversation that we were talking about.
Okay.
Well, I'll comment on that. The criminalization of Black mental illness, this may ruffle some feathers, but whenever a Black man commits some form of violence, egregious violence, it is seen as they're deviant. Whenever a non-Black man commits some form of violence, such as the shooting in Highland Park or the shooting at the grocery store in Buffalo, is seen as, oh, he has mental illness. And there's something wrong with that. Can all the Black mental health professionals in Chicago have a basketball camp for Black boys and girls and shoot some hoop and talk mental health? Sure. Who's going to lead that? I'll show up. I can't play ball, but I'll be there. Any other question?
Um,
Oh, thanks for the email. I mean, thanks for your email address.
so Jacob, Jay wants to know how long would you say a men's mental health has been a national conversation?
How long would I say men's mental health has been a national conversation?
Mhm.
Mm, I wouldn't know how long it's been, because one, I've been in the field for a while, so it's always been prevalent to me. But I could tell you when I was in high school and in college, that was not the conversation. It was not even a discussion. I actually believe that COVID accentuated the need for mental health. It actually brought to light and created courage in Black men to seek help. Because before COVID, there was no national platform at all for mental health the way it is now. We did have a football player who played for the Bears and then played for the Jets, and I can't remember his name. I'm sure someone in this chat can put down his name. He was definitely one of the first to admit that he had bipolar, and that was like a huge deal for someone who plays football to admit that they had mental health. But that still didn't bring to light. And then you had a couple of basketball players admit that they had depression or mental health as well. What are some similarities in Black men mental health and Black women's mental health, and what are ways we can support one another? Thank you, Brandon Marshall. Thank you, Susan. That was him. So one of the similarities is our lack of resources and our lack of taking the courage to look for those resources, because it's not just Black men that are prioritizing making money, it's Black women as well. And they will put going to work over taking care of their mental health. They will put their kids' mental health over theirs. They would deny, both men and women, deny having any form of mental health and say that it's the kid that is the client. I don't have any issues. I don't have any problems. I'm fine. When you're not.
How do we bring out those suffering in silence who doesn't trust anyone?
That requires for a community to embrace that individual. And it really requires for someone who is familiar with mental health interventions to support them. You're not going to go if you don't feel safe going. You're not going to, take a risk and experience the shame of being disrespected if you feel going to someone is going to be harmful for you and your mental health, for your integrity, for the fear of embarrassment. So having a community that is actually supporting mental health, mental illness, physical health is critical. And I do believe like the 84 of us in this call is a stepping stone in that direction.
How has the social determinants of health played into mental health? Has the survey the physicians done actually helped?
I'm not familiar with the survey.
Is that referring to, I'm assuming the test the doctor gives when the parent leaves the room that may have something to do with that? Do you think that that helps?
So it requires the kid to be honest about what's going on with them. So some kids are afraid of being honest about what's going with them for fear of breaking the don't tell no one what's going on in our house. What happens in this house stays in this house. All those messages are put on kids, especially Black kids. Black and brown kids hear that constantly. But if a Black child does admit that they have some form of mental health, what does the Black mom or dad feel when their kid admits that? that Black mom or dad may feel that they failed their kid. They may feel embarrassed that their kid disclosed that there's an imperfection in the household. So there's a lot of consequences to actually admitting that the kid says, yeah, I feel depressed and this is why. My parents argue all the time. That could be really complicated.
So we have a comment. It says you mentioned that there's a Jeff, a Black
There's a Black
man.
men in mental health provider roles.
Yes.
How can a white woman dominated field hope to address needs of Black youth in a more systemic way? Feel like our current stance is they have to meet us halfway, which completely disregards the systemic reasoning Black youth and adults are less likely to seek mental health services in the first place. So I don't think it's about halfway. I think it's about Black people need to recognize that non-Black people are competent in supporting them. The issue is if they don't look like them, then you're already behind the eight ball. You already feel like I can't trust you. And honestly, I know a lot of black people who do this work who shouldn't be doing this work. So it's not always about being Black that gives you the credibility to do this work.
Can you provide or have a statement that can be expressed to a man to have them feel safe enough to trust the process of addressing their mental health?
So one of the things I like to say is if you have a headache, what do? Take ibuprofen. If you have high blood pressure, what do? You take medication for your high blood pressure. If you have kidney issues, what do? You get dialysis. The same applies for your mental health as well. If you are not mentally well, you need to take the same priority that you put towards taking the ibuprofen or doing things that would take care of your kidney issues like dialysis. That has to have the same type of priority. Abari talked about the importance of having all the natural everyday healing steps of breathing, eating well, cooking. I would tell you that it is critical for the Black community, especially, to start shopping on the outside of the store instead of the inner rows of the store. Do people know what I'm talking about when I say that? So I'll give you a little hint. The perimeter of the grocery store is where fresh food is. In the inner rows of the grocery store is where processed foods are. So you find yourself in the inner rows of the grocery store. You're getting lots of groceries that are processed foods, which the body does a lot of work to process processed foods versus fresh lettuce, fruits, vegetables, meats, things of that nature. But you know what? That has a cost because it is more expensive to shop on the perimeter of the store than it is in the middle of the store. So it's about priorities. If you are driving but you're shopping in the middle of the aisles, perhaps you need to shift your priorities.
How would having housing and jobs elevate some of the stressors on men's mental health?
Ask that one again.
It says, how would having housing and jobs alleviate some of the stressors on men's mental health?
If I'm not preoccupied with having a place to live, if I'm not preoccupied with worrying about if my kids are going to eat, if my family's going to eat, I'm less stressed. And with stress comes complications of mental health. So you have to have housing in order for that to alleviate the stress. And if you don't have housing, even if you're like living in a shelter, and someone would say, well, that's still housing. that's temporary housing. And who knows when the people who are running the shelter will tell you it's time for you to go.
So, Jacob, I see a lot of women in the comments asking questions.
Oh,
So I
sure.
would just want to say, no, I'm answering. Those are the ones I'm giving you. But I would
Okay.
just want to say that we have 81 people here, and I know it's at least 25 men on here. So I would really like to hear the male's perspective on how we can support them and what they need to feel supported. This is a safe space, and I want to make sure that this time is being used for the men on the call to be heard. So gentlemen, please speak up. We want to hear your concerns, and we want to make sure that you feel supported.
So I wonder if um, us as Black men are not responding because either we got what we needed from the workshop and or there is a sense of not feeling safe to be vulnerable. All right, let's see what we got here. How can a partner support her mate, maintaining the balance of being supportive and nurturing while still upholding a standard of elevation? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Jay, can you elaborate on the question, please?
It's the standard elevation part that I'm not really quite following. Some partners want their men to strive and be great without adding pressure. How can one maintain the balance? Okay. So I would say how that messaged is what matters. If I'm like, let's say I'm just doing okay at work and you as my partner know that I want a job promotion, how are you encouraging me to move towards that promotion? Are you telling me, you just need to work harder, you're not working hard enough? Come on, let's tighten up this resume, or are you like more empathic in your supportive stance? I think that there are a lot of people who hear messages of gotta work harder at getting what you want. And when you hear that message, if that's messaged in a way where I feel shame that I'm not working as hard as my partner wants me to, I'm going to start keeping things to myself. So there has to be a way of demonstrating empathy and support at the same time. The same as we would do a client, the same way we would do a coworker. But there's a different standard when you have your partner because that's your partner. But I say that's requires, because it is your partner, even more diligence in being empathic and supportive. How do we address mental health with a man who would not acknowledge that it's a real issue? That's the issue. This is exactly the issue. I would gently point out the similarities of, depending on what the mental health issue is. So if it's depression, I would somehow find a way to show what depression looks like and what the symptoms are for everyone, not just Black men, or what anxiety looks like for everyone, what PTSD looks like for everyone, and have you as the partner let them know that you will go with them to the mental health professional, that you will support them in getting some form of help, that you will read articles with them, because they have to feel safe to be vulnerable. They have to feel safe.
We have someone that would like to come off of the mute for a second. They have a comment they would like to make. Is that okay, Jacob?
Yeah, I
Okay.
welcome that.
Yeah, so hi, this is Kenji. One of the things that I guess I am sometimes frustrated by these kinds of spaces and conversations is, or has to do with, is the fact that a lot of times we'll describe a quote unquote mental health issue, but ignore the fact that the framework that we're using to assess that is normative and in some cases white supremacist, right? So like our understandings of disorder have been in large part shaped by white sociality and
Absolutely.
culture, dominant culture. And so like I think part of the challenge that I have is oftentimes we're describing behaviors that look bad from the position of like what a white body would deem acceptable or normative, instead of like understanding that some of these behaviors actually do make sense and have a rationale, that they're not illogical. And so part of the problem, right, is that destigmatizes and keeps people away from seeking competent, culturally competent kind of mental health services and supports. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I've seen a couple comments where people are talking about general quote unquote mental health issues, but I think it's also really important to name specific behaviors that people are identifying as problematic and also name the context that they're operating within. Is it bad for the context, or is it bad because it's an abstract behavior that you've decided is aberrant compared to like what we would expect from white, well property people?
Kenji, thank you for that. So I'm going to say a couple of things to that. Number one, all behavior serves a purpose. So every behavior that is demonstrated comes from a space of past experience, comes from a space of shared experience. It doesn't have to be labeled as a disorder or PTSD or anything of that nature. The key operative thing is it harming to the self? So if someone is depressed and that depression is resulting in they're not eating, they're not getting out of bed, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not bathing, that is a self-harming behavior. It may serve a purpose of keeping themselves safe because of the depression is coming from a space of being ridiculed, or maybe even there's an epigenetic example of depression that has been passed down through DNA. But regardless of that, it's about, does the behavior cause harm to the self and or to others? And that doesn't necessarily have to be labeled as a mental health disorder or labeled as some form of DSM-5 diagnosis. It's simply that behavior is causes some sort of lack of functioning for the individual. And that's what I think needs to be addressed. If a Black man is not functioning operatively for himself, if he's not being supported to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm not right, how does he get help? And if we have spaces where Black men can be supported outside of the context of the standard primary care physician or outside of the context of the standard therapist, I'm fine with that. Just as long as Black men feel vulnerable enough to admit that they have issues and that they feel supported to get help to get the issues resolved.
Thank you for that. Can you talk about men setting boundaries for self-care without feeling guilt?
The word self-care has a lot of weight, right? Self-care has to be designed in a way where it is actually providing care for the self versus seen as or viewed as, oh, you're being lazy, you're resting too much, you're prioritizing other people other than yourself. I mean, you're prioritizing yourself other than other people. And I think that when it comes down to self-care, there has to be a boundary set where this is my time for me. Now, we all know that some people like to say that watching football on Sunday is that time for them. And that very well may be true, but is that really taking care of yourself, or is that a reason to just disconnect? Is that disconnection serving the purpose of caring, or is that disconnection serving the purpose of creating isolation?
Mm, good question.
Tanisha says a lot of self-care is aftercare.
hmm. Ralph had a comment. I think I didn't skip past it kind of fast. Ralph said, if a brother shares with a woman a deep, dark, delicate, and sensitive issue, that the woman should be open, quick to listen to all of it without judgment or question, be patient so he may feel safe, emotional, embraced, and thank him for sharing the information with them. Thank you for that, Ralph.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't have anything to add to that.
Thank you for that. Shar says it's like a battery. We have to recharge it when it burns out. Burnouts are real.
And we have to recognize what burnout looks like for people. Black men burnout looks different probably than Black women burnout. It looks different than non-Black people burnout. Burnout can look like vegging in front of the football, right, all day Sunday, because you're just so overwhelmed with caring for the family. This is the only time you get to take care of you. But isolation is the breeding ground for issues. Is we are designed as human beings to connect. Connection is clearly important. Have you seen or engaged book groups for helping men communally process difficult emotions? I've not held a book group before. I've held groups with to Black men, and let me tell you this: it took 8 sessions for my Black men to admit their vulnerability. So that's 8 different Thursdays, 6 p.m. for the Black men to feel comfortable to admit to their vulnerability.
Comment, healing trauma and self-care takes time, intention, and patience. If you haven't been using those healthy habits of practice for years, so give yourself the grace to deeply heal before evolving and transforming. Tanisha says she would like to disagree sometimes. Isolation is healthy to recharge and reset, gives you an opportunity to feel, an opportunity to reconnect with self, with God, or a higher power.
Absolutely. I'm not talking about isolation in the context of once in a while. I'm talking about isolation as a coping strategy for all the time. So if you find yourself always isolating and you're not connected with anyone, there is where I may disagree with Tanisha. I do agree that there is need and purpose for isolating. I want to do that all the time when I go to the gym. Headphones on, I'm not talking to nobody. I'm trying to work out and do my workout. I'm not trying to talk to anyone. So I want to make a comment real quick before we wrap up. There is a woman by the name of Dr. Michelle Lino, and she's a clinical psychologist. And I want to provide a quote to everyone in what she says. She says, "Strong is not pretending all the time that there is nothing wrong with you." Again, strong is not pretending all the time that there's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes strong is admitting that there's something wrong with you.
That is correct. So thank you, Jacob, so much for being a part of this conversation. We really appreciate it. Dr. Obari, we also want to thank you again for taking the time out to join us as well. I see a few questions in the chat regarding the CEUs. I am getting ready to drop the link for the CEUs in the chat. If you are an MFS employee, please do not use that link, but contact me separately. They have a separate link for you for your CEUs. Everyone else that needs them, you can complete the link that's in the chat. Also, take 5 minutes to complete our event survey. This information is relevant as we are creating these conversations in these workshops. So please take the time out to do so. And as you can see on the screen, tomorrow, please join us if you can. The registration is still open. We'll be having a panel discussion about how we can bridge the gaps and build a relationship with our new arrivals within the community. And thanks again.
Tiara, I have a question
Yes.
or a comment rather. I'm trying to do your Survey Monkey survey, and some of your radio buttons don't match up with what you're asking. One asks to check all that apply, but it's only allowing you to check one of
Okay.
them.
Okay. Well, can you just check the one that resonates with you the most, and then I'll
Sure.
go in and edit it,
Sure.
and I'll
Okay.
resend it out to everyone that registered.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, and the link. I know you all had some tech issues today. I'm glad everything worked out. Are you all sending the link for tomorrow's session today, or is it going to be sent
It
like a
gets
few minutes
sent out
before?
in the morning. I try to send it out by 8:30. Keep in mind, if you spell like your email or you use a different email address, whatever registration email address you use, that's where I'm sending it to. Also check your junk. If you're an MS employee, for some reason, sometimes my system kind of kicks you guys back. So it will be coming from my personal email at tiarao@claretianassociates.org.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. Anyone else have any